Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to MACFEST 2024. Wherever you are joining us from, tell us in the chat where we are sitting in the world. I'm sitting in the UK. My name is Yixuan and I'm a member of MACFEST team. As Ramadan continues, we have today another delightful event about cuisine and culture with two lovely ladies who already hosted last year, Yvonne and Shadab. This time they will talk about food and fine arts healings. Our host for today is Mariam and Afolabi, a very special young lady who has been a part of MACFEST team for years. She will introduce Shadab and Yvonne. Before we start the event, I'd like to thank you for all your donations of MACFEST, which help us to create so many incredible events, mostly free for you. We have a lot for coming this year, so please stay connected via newsletter and on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Use our hashtag SpreadHoneyNotate. And today, feel free to post your comments and questions in the chat or in the Q&A portal. We will answer them all. And over to you, Mariam.
Thank you very much, Yishuan, for that warm welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, salam alaikum to everyone joining us from all over the world. I'm delighted once again to welcome you to MACFEST 2024's Ramadan Festival and to introduce our speakers for today's event, who we have previously hosted in last year's Ramadan event for an event called Flavors of Al-Andalus, a culinary history in poetry and recipes, which is now available for you to watch on the MACFEST YouTube channel called MACFEST International. They both delivered a wonderful culinary event, so that's why we decided to bring them back again for this year's culinary event. And it's also interesting for you to know that they are both joining us from the United States of America, specifically in California, which is very early for them. It's around 6 a.m. in the morning, I believe. So thank you very much to Shadab and Yvonne for joining us this early in the morning. And before we start the event, we would like to wish all of our Christian friends and audience a very happy Easter holiday. We do hope you enjoy your holidays. So, and now I would like to introduce our first host for this event, who is going to be Shadab Hashmi. I'll say a few words about her. Shadab Hashmi, ZeestHashmi's poetry and essays has been published worldwide. She is the winner of the San Diego Book Award, Cebu's Hybrid Book Prize, and the Nazim Hikmet Poetry Prize. Her books include Baker of Tarifa, Hall and Chalk, Ghazal Cosmopolitan, and the lyric memoir Comb. ZeestHashmi's poems has been translated into Spanish, Bosnian, Urdu, and Turkish, and her work has appeared in the Paris Snooker, Moodlak, and the Cult Review, Poem, World Literature Today, Verse Daily, Trush, Wasarafi, Mark Sweeney's In the Shape of a Human Body. I'm visiting the Health and the Best Asian Poetry for 2021, among other publications. So you'll be delighted to learn that our host for today is a well-renowned poet, and is bound to give you share a lot of our knowledge and experience. Thank you very much once again, Shadab, for coming along to this event. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for that introduction, Mariam. Good morning to everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. I am joining from San Diego today. I'm wishing you Ramadan Kareem, happy Easter. It is, as Mariam said, it is 6 a.m. in the morning. We just finished our sahur and offered our Fajr prayer. And if you can hear me okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
I am going to begin my, before I begin my presentation, I'd like us to take a moment and send a prayer for the people of Gaza. We have been thinking about them, as my friend Dima Shahabi, Palestinian poet Dima Shahabi says, Palestine is in our eyes, in our hearts, on our minds, and on our shoulders. So little moment, little prayer for them today, especially as you know, these are the holiest days of Ramadan. The last 10 days are the most sacred part of the month. So I'm going to begin my presentation. I have a slideshow. And thank you, Tom, for managing the slideshow, the PowerPoint. So we're talking about food and the fine arts of healing. Yvonne, with whom I've collaborated in the past, many times in the past, has a very rich presentation on the fine arts of cuisine, Islamic tradition of cuisine from and healing foods from the Quran and Sunnah. So I'm just going to do a very brief overview of the food part, and I'm really going to go deep into the fine arts aspect of healing. So what you see in the title slide is this beautiful, beautifully decorated bread that I had in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. And I was so inspired, I took pictures. And, you know, it reminds you of how nourishment is more than just food. It's also how we enjoy nature and the world around us and express that beauty in, you know, even in a piece of bread like this. So next slide, please. Islam is al-din al-fitra, nature's connectedness, or the way of nature. Nature's connectedness with everything in existence makes it the most important common language. It honors our relationship with all things and offers a reservoir of materials and mechanics from which to derive healing practices as well as art. The Quran and the prophetic tradition shed light on health benefits found in nature. Again, Yvonne has a very rich and detailed PowerPoint, and she'll go into details. This is her part of her expertise. I'm just going to mention things that if you've grown up in a Muslim household, you know the use of miswak for your teeth and, you know, oil and henna, but foods such as honey, caraway, dates, figs, and how best to consume them. We learn this from the prophetic tradition. And then, you know, commandments such as abstaining from excess, maximizing nutrition, maintaining a balance, channeling calmness, gratitude, and generosity as part of dining habits, social connectedness, taking delight in enjoying food together. And also I'm going to mention this book that I've used for my research by Al-Jawziyya. It's called Medicine of the Prophet. It's a wonderful translation. And it goes into things like, you know, healing, but also the social aspects of healing, such as visiting the sick and making food for grieving people, for people who are grieving a loved one. So some special recipes that bring comfort to the heart. I also want to draw your attention to this photograph. It's a photograph of a model of the Great Mosque of Cordoba, which, you know, it was one of the first mosques of Islam, and it's built in Spain. Many of you may have visited it. This is the famous patio of oranges, and I want you to just, you know, rest your gaze on everything that's happening in this model of this 8th century mosque. You see there is an orange tree. There you see there is worshipper performing ablutions. He's preparing himself for salat. And there's sunshine. There is the sound of water. You can imagine the sound of the fountain. There must be bird song if there are trees. And you can also feel, because if you are of the Muslim faith and you perform ablutions, the ritual ablutions, the wudu, You know how it feels on your skin. It washes us, it cools us, it prepares us for the sacred moments of Salat. And then you also see in the background other worshippers. So there's a feeling of community, there's a feeling of brotherhood, fellowship. And all of this whole environment basically reaches us through the senses, right? You know, so the sunshine, the trees, the water, it prepares us for the sacred moments of prayer because it already begins to heal us, heal our spirits, to repair us and restore us. So next slide, please. So again, Islam is the way of nature, Din al-Fitra. And what you see, the picture that you see is a prayer rug in common use in Muslim households. So our bodies are governed by inner rhythms, seasonal rhythms, diurnal, nocturnal cycles, social, interpersonal, intergenerational, and age-related cycles. We understand our whole life as a series of rhythms, even life beyond, and even beyond life. Also, you know, the heart and the brain are send electromagnetic pulses. Those are also rhythms. And how we take in nutrition and air and external elements and how we dispel them, how we recycle materials. Those are all cycles and rhythms. Balance. The Quran is Al-Mizan, or the great balance. The prophetic tradition of health-directed habits demonstrate how to create balance between the body, mind, and soul. Healing and the Islamic ethos of harmony. Healing and well-being come from inward and outward balance or harmony, a principle also central to the fine arts. So next slide, please. The fine arts make use of rhythms and patterns found in nature, sound waves, light waves, sonic and rhythmic patterns in language, in nuances of motion and space, the patterns of flora and fauna, so on. What you see in the photo is a beautiful tile. When you can see there are geometric patterns and there are also vegetal patterns. Art utilizes sensory input for a calming effect, which promotes healing. Combinations of soothing colors and sounds, light, texture, fragrance, lyric language, have a peaceful, pleasant, stimulating effect on the psyche, which in turn heal the body, mind, and spirit. Next slide, please. So the picture that you see is a tulip, and what's written inside? Allah and his 99 names, the 99 names that we remember God by. And I'll say a little bit more about the tulip in the next slide. Beauty as a spiritual value. So I'm going to talk about healing and the sacred arts of Islam. There's a prophetic saying that goes, God is beautiful and he loves beauty. So rhythmic recitation in beautiful tones is prescribed. The Quran is prescribed to be recited with a measured rhythm and in beautiful tones. Healing verses, there are specific verses or chapters that are prescribed as channels of healing. Surah Yasin, for instance, is prescribed as a surah to read by the sickbed. Chanting the 99 beautiful names of God, and these names are called Al-Asma al-Husna, beautiful names. Contemplating God's 99 names and chanting them in measured breaths has a calming, strengthening effect. And next slide, please. So again, you see tulips and you see the word Hu, which refers to God, Him, which refers to Allah. And so zikr, or remembrance of Allah, promotes healing. Quranic verse, in remembrance of God, hearts find comfort. And calligraphy is a central fine art in Islamic cultures, Islamic civilization. Reading and writing are sacred arts, as they embody the sacred and are instruments of ilm, or knowledge, and ultimately lead us to greater balance and peace. So the story of the tulip is that in the Ottoman Empire, the tulip flower became very important. It was imported from Kashmir and grown in all over the Turkic lands and the Ottoman lands. And the word in Persian for tulip is lale, and which, if you rearrange the letters, it has the same letters as Allah. And it became part of the artistic tradition to make the tulip a symbol of the word Allah. And so you'll see in the Ottoman fine arts many representations of the tulip flower and the word Allah either inscribed inside or outside. And sometimes it was just became a symbol of divine beauty and so on. And you'll see it everywhere, from calligraphy on paper and on textiles and different materials, metal, glass, so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Islamic tradition of the fine arts. The arts help us to process emotion, to make sense of our existence, access the spirit, and integrate sense with spirit, self with community. Calligraphic arts. Script woven into textiles, as I said, inscribed on metal, glass, ceramic, etc. You see this, you see this in museums, special pieces, but you also see this in our daily lives in Islamic cultures all over the world, from the Far East to Western Europe to parts of Africa, West Africa, North Africa. We have these traditions of calligraphy, different kinds of fonts developed over the past millennium and a half of the Islamic civilization. Architecture, buildings that maximize natural elements like sunlight, fresh air, fragrant foliage, water. Garden design is very important in Islamic building, as gardens are very important also as public, as places where people converge and enjoy nature. And also there's a tradition of having gardens in hospitals. There's a tradition in Baghdad, in the golden age of Baghdad, as well as Muslim Spain, to have these beautiful gardens that patients could walk through, and their well-being the intention was to promote well-being, health, recovery, so on. So water features, decorative, functional ablution fountains, cisterns, pools, wells, and these would often be decorated with beautiful ceramics. And the idea was to enjoy the sound of water, and water as, of course, a cleansing agent. And just the beauty of water, the visual beauty, the sonic beauty, and so on. So it's maximized in the Islamic architecture and garden design and so on. So use of geometry in design, structural proportions, aesthetics that stimulate and soothe. And geometry is a miracle. It goes really far in promoting well-being. So geometrical and vegetal motifs promote an aura of contemplation and peace. Music. Songs of praise as part of purification practice, ecstatic forms such as Qawwali, as we know. If you know the song Ta'ala al-Badru Alayna, that was the first naat that was sung when the Prophet, peace be upon him, entered Medina, when the moment of the hijrah itself from Makkah to Medina. This song was presented by children. It's a song of praise for the Prophet. And so there are songs of praise all over the Muslim world in every language. And these songs, ecstatic songs, devotional songs, bring the communities together. If you know the Qawwali tradition, it's also a very popular song of praise that is performed in a group. And these songs, these traditions bring us together as communities and people who share the same faith. So musical instruments, the string and bow instruments that we find, the viola and violin, the whole violin family, they were actually introduced to Muslim Spain, so to all of Europe through Muslim Spain via Baghdad. And so Muslims in the millennium and a half of Muslim civilization, there have been new instruments and new kinds of music that was introduced to different parts of the world. So the routes are different. Persia, via Baghdad, via South Asia, India, so on and so forth. So next slide, please. So, and among the Islamic tradition of the fine arts, the art of the book is very important. It's very central. So calligraphy is part of that. And as well as illumination, bookbinding with leather crafts, and the craft of the manuscript. Because the book, the art of the book, is central because reading is very central in the Islamic ethos, reading and writing. And so in the Islamic cultures, all kinds of accessories were developed and lovingly crafted. Pen cases, ink pots. What you see in the picture is this beautiful table with ink pots and these pen cases. They're often made of different kinds of metal, copper or ivory or wood. Often fragrant wood was used. So you can imagine that it's not just one sense, it's multiple senses. When you open a pen case that is made of fragrant wood, you take in the scent of that wood, you open it, you use the pen for your calligraphy. It is a multi-sensory experience. It is a healing experience. It's a relaxing experience. It is a stimulating experience. And it invites more creativity and more spiritual focus and so on. So apart from these accessories for writing, there are also carved book stands, rahel. Again, this is something familiar in a Muslim household. We use it for the Quran and for other books as well. So these book stands, the rahel, and then special furniture, low benches or stools like these that were used for reading and writing. Poetry, poetic forms that originated, some of them originated in pre-Islamic Arabia, like the ghazal and qasida, made it into the Muslim world and beyond. And the prosody supposedly was a concept in Arabic before any other culture. And so that prosody, the rhyme schemes, and so on, these poetic forms then entered in very early on, in the 7th century, in the 8th century, into Persian and Islamic Spain, North Africa, and later into South Asia, India, and so on. And these forms are written to this day. They're still very popular forms. The qasida, the ghazal, and the masnavi. I'm going to be reading a ghazal today, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this form that came from the Islamic civilization. Storytelling and narrative texts. tradition of stylized storytelling or dastan goi, also illustrated manuscripts, weaving story into textile. So these are beautiful concepts, not just that people get together and have a form of storytelling. It's a form that it's a part of the oral tradition, but also the written tradition. What happens when people are sharing stories? They learn new things, they transmit their tradition, and this art is it became very sophisticated in the Muslim cultures for many different reasons. One reason is the Quran itself has narrative elements that are very important. And these are the stories of the prophets and what we learn from them and so on. So Muslim artists, poets, writers later on made use of these texts, of these narrations, and then they developed their own based on these Quranic narrations. And so now we have a whole tradition of these narrative texts that are written or part of the oral tradition. And these are also part of the written tradition, and you see them in calligraphy and illustrated manuscripts, illuminated manuscripts, but also textile. So the stories are woven into carpets, the whole story, and you'll see a picture in a slide later. So could I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to share just a very short list. It's actually a very long list, but I'm just going to share a few of some works of art specifically linked to healing. So the symbolic language of the arts widen our capacity to express the nuances and subtleties that conventional languages cannot convey. That's the use of poetry and the stylized storytelling, the Masnavi style that Rumi adopted, because we are expressing things that are impossible to convey in the languages that we speak. So we create these new languages in the poetic forms, in the narrative forms that express all of those things. Art's restorative quality helps to relieve our burdens, create special bonds, and stimulate healing. So the first one that I want to talk about is Qasida Burda, and it's a poem that's very familiar in the Muslim world. It's sung in, it's originally in Arabic, written by the Egyptian Sufi poet and Imam Busiri. He's also a famous calligrapher, by the way. So this poem is a poem of praise for the Prophet, peace be upon him. And it's part of a lore of healing. Imam Busiri suffered from paralysis, and he wrote this poem as part of his supplications to Allah for healing. And the legend goes that he actually was healed from his paralysis after having written this poem. And so it's a beautiful poem, and it's sung everywhere, from Indonesia to, parts of Africa to, of course, to in South Asia. And it's an Arabic form, all parts of the Arabic speaking world. Qissa Chahar Darwish, it's a classic suite of tales written by Amir Khusro to help the great Sufi master Nizamuddin Aulia heal from a long illness. And what this is just a suite of tales that these dervishes relate, and they're tales within tales. And this sort of entertainment, this sort of distraction from pain and physical suffering was meant to alleviate pain, meant to relax the patient, meant to heal and comfort, and also, when we hear a story in a voice, being read to us, we feel cared for, and it helps in our healing. So there's so many aspects to this art of storytelling. So the Neefe flute is another one. If you know anything about the Sufi tradition, especially the one that was started by or inspired by the poetry of Jalaluddin Rumi, you know about the Neefe flute as well. The Neefe flute is very central to the aesthetic that was generated from Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi's poetry. So in his poetry, the song of the reed flute is a cry expressing the sorrow of separation from the divine beloved. It compels us to empty ourselves of the ego and become a vessel of pure praise, just like the ney itself, thereby healing our spirits. And here the idea is that if you heal your spirit, you also heal your body. You also mend your social relationships. You become healthy in every way because you become closer to God. And also the idea is that it's not that we have to achieve this closeness. It's a journey of closeness. Rumi teaches us that we're all close to God. And God is our true home. It's just that we forget where we come from. And so the Neefe flute reminds us that if we forget, if we remove the ego, we become closer to God. So on next slide, and I can talk a little bit more. I'll talk a little bit more about the Mosque of Cordoba. Could we go to the previous slide, please, for a second? This photo is a photo of the Mosque of Cordoba, and a very famous masterpiece, Sufi masterpiece written by Allama Iqbal in Urdu, praises this mosque, and it's an ars poetica, which means that it's a poem that talks about aesthetics and beauty and the creation of beauty as a spiritual value. It shows us the relationship between a beautiful spirit and beautiful art, and how the best art comes from a refined spirit that's close to God. So next slide, please. And I'm just going to now give you some examples, famous examples. So this is a hand fan. These are just crafts from the Muslim world. It's a hand fan with Hafiz's Sufi ghazal written on each panel of it. So it's a beautiful piece. It shows you that these crafts that used art, beautiful art and poetry, combined the arts, were things of daily use, and they were used. The idea was to bring this sort of peace, sense of peace, wholeness, and spiritual wholeness in one's life. So next slide, please. And this is a Kashmiri rug woven with Attar's narrative Sufi poem, The Conference of the Birds. It's a very famous long poem by the Sufi poet Attar. And this rug belongs to a poet friend. He's a Kashmiri American poet called Rafiq Katwari. And you see the different birds. They're all characters from this great Sufi story. Next slide, please. This is from a Sufi lodge in Istanbul. And what you see is calligraphers working, and there's a prayer. It's a prayer that the art of calligraphy has, of course, it can be secular as well. Any book can be written in beautiful font. But here, the idea is that these Sufis are working on sacred sort of manuscript. And they're making this prayer of trying to achieve the best results in their work. So this shows you that it's just basically it's a reminder that this art is a spiritual value. So next slide, please. And I'm going to end here. Before I read my own poems, I'm just going to say that there's so much to explore in this topic. This was a very, very short, very brief presentation. And so I'd encourage you to, when you go to museums, when you read, when you visit these sites, any mosque, any madrasa, any building that makes use of Islamic art, just notice how many different kinds of cultures are combined in these expressions. Here I'm showing you Chinese Islamic calligraphy by Haji Noordin. Some of you may be able to read this. It says, Ahlan Ramadan, welcome Ramadan. And this piece combines the Chinese aesthetic style with the Arabic tradition. So now we have a Chinese, and Islam in China goes back century 9, I think it was around the 10th century. The first mosque was built in the 8th century already. So you see very, very soon after Islam's arrival in the world, there was a mosque in China. And the Great Mosque in Beijing was made in the 10th century. So this is just for you to explore and to observe, you know, anywhere in the world you go, you'll see the arts combined as a spiritual expression in the Muslim cultures. Okay, and I'm going to now share some poems, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the poems I'm sharing today. I'm going to share some poems from my book, Baker of Tarifa, which is a series of poems based on the civilization of Muslim Spain, or Al-Andalus. This is a period from the 8th century, 711, so 8th century, to 1492, the end of the 15th century. 800 years, over 800 years, so it's nearly a millennium of Muslims ruling Spain. And, you know, this is a story of the Abrahamic civilization. It's a story of what is called the convivencia, or peaceful coexistence. And in my book, I talk about how this civilization evolved, how it came apart, and how the final collapse happened. So I'm going to read to you a poem from it, the title poem, Baker of Tarifa. Bread is a central metaphor in this book, and we're talking about food and healing. So I'm going to share two poems from this book, one from the portion of the section of the book that is about this great coexistence, this peaceful coexistence of the Muslims, Christians, and Jews living together in harmony in Al-Andalus. And the second poem that I'm going to share is about the period of conflict. Baker of Tarifa. Coals left over from breakfast will be enough. You'll need a cup of crushed almonds. Pistachios cost more than a bottle of Syrian perfume these days, so do without. Brown sugar and plenty of butter. Also an eye cup of rose water for the filling. Mukawwara means arena. Cut the bread neatly in that shape. Take care the dough has been softened with fresh milk. Sing what your mother sang when you fry the bread. And I thought to share a poem from the period when this civilization began coming apart. There were conflicts, and the same people who had lived very peacefully together began to have animosity against each other, and there were wars, there was a lot of violence and so on. So this poem is called Diary of a Wartime Chef. And the idea of this poem is, when we are going through lean times for any reason, we don't have enough food, or we're going through war, which is also, it can cause lean times or starvation. We still have the language language of food and the memories associated with eating and eating together. So that's what this poem is about. Diary of a wartime chef. Only winter berries, wild mushrooms, and each of us half the man he came. No more of heroes. Instead, they want to hear advice. Always keep the mortar clean. Recipes. Before frying in sweet oil, slash and coat the eggplants with a mixture of egg whites, pepper, cilantro juice, murree, and powdered lavender. Serve hot with segments of citrus. They fall asleep between bread and entree, and more advice. Use medium-sized eggplants. They lay there emaciated. Remember to fill the cuts with salt to remove bitterness. And I mentioned a poetic form earlier, the ghazal, which came from pre-Islamic Arabia and then became part of many different traditions, from Persian to Urdu to Hebrew to German, Spanish, and now we write the ghazal in English. So I'm going to be sharing a ghazal of mine, and this is dedicated to Gaza. And give you a little bit of context. This poem is called Ghazal for an Amputation. So many children have had to go through an amputation that the young generation of Palestinians will have the most amputees in any population in proportion. So when I was reading about amputations and how children are rescued from the rubble, I also read about how anesthesia is banned. And in the absence of anesthesia, the best that one can do is to give sugar to numb the pain for very briefly, of course. You know, it's a very painful process, as you can imagine, especially for a child to go through an amputation. The ghazal form is a form in couplets, 2 lines each. And I'm going to read it in the traditional ghazal style, in the Urdu ghazal style. You'll hear a refrain, and the refrain is sweet. We're talking about food and healing. And the anesthesia is not available, but sweets are not available either. So you can just imagine the pain that these children go through when they go through these amputations. Ghazal for an amputation. You ban anesthesia, blood game the sweet. You ban anesthesia, blood game the sweet. Evict her, chase her, bomb her, then blame the sweet. How to cut her little legs to save her life. How to cut her little legs to save her life. How inhabit love's rubble when you maim the sweet. No sugar in the promised land to numb your pain. No sugar in the promised land to numb your pain. Mary herself pours you nectar, names the sweet. Child, your once supple limbs will to you return. What belongs in paradise will claim the sweet. And this last couplet, which is self-addressed, my name Zeest. Zeest, you saw the world fray, weep, dance the dabke. Zeest, you saw the world fray, weep, dance the dabke. Saw how by love's force the bitter became the sweet. And I'm going to end with a passage from an essay that talks about my own healing from a concussion, and how I learned to, this is many years ago, how I learned to access the Sufi arts, the Islamic arts, for my own brain healing when I had an injury, a head and neck injury many years ago. For months, and this is so, this passage appears in the middle, and I'm talking about what happened after my concussion. For months, I will lie on this futon facing the window, studying the subtle shifts of light and color in the garden outside, the fragrance, taste, and texture in the kitchen inside. I begin to study the mysticism of the senses. After dawn, when the sky is a warmer shade of blue, Fajr, the morning prayer, seems less of the chore it seems the moment I awaken. The sound of flowing water, bird song, and the gently drawn-out rhythm of the call to prayer from the alarm clock, with the cadence of word meeting breath in Allah, and in the next line, Salat, prayer, followed by Falah, thriving goodness, stays with me. As do the honeycomb arches and framed postcards, tiles with cobalt and turquoise hexagons, green and saffron spiral tendrils on the soap dish, and on the wall next to the basin and mirror, where I catch the first blurred glimpse of myself washing before prayer. In this sliver of time between night and morning, when words are a dream-filled mist in my mouth, thoughts in the shadow of daily disasters, illumination comes through the divine language of beauty. Cultivating my Muslim spiritual life is no different than the practice of poetry, both purposed for plumbing the depths of existence. Prophet Muhammad said, God is beautiful and he loves beauty. I am just beginning to comprehend that phrase. It is tradition to remember God by Al-Asma al-Husna, or the beautiful names, among them Al-Khaliq, the creator, Al-Mubdi, the originator, but also Al-Musawwir, the artist or the fashioner, and Al-Latif, the subtle one. One way to communicate with and glorify the divine is to create works of beauty that harmonize with nature and ultimately benefit humanity by healing or by inviting reflection. I have not been able to write much since the accident, but I am discovering new ways of listening, nuanced dialects of the unspoken or the subtly spoken between the self and the other who is never too far from the self. I attempt to see better too. I recall the lambent, leafy exteriors of mosques, doors carved with patterns that hearken to infinity around an omnipresent center, gracefully rising minarets, mother-of-pearl domes, windows holding sunlight in their embrace. There's also the inexplicable finesse of garden design, dictated by the confluence of fragrance in different seasons, color, shape, scent coming together. I recall walking barefoot on wood or marble steps. The instinct to build an idiom of harmonious beauty manifests itself most fully in architecture, which marries the elegant exactitude of geometry with the organic ecstasy of floral motifs or the life-affirming fluidity of the written word. Elevating as it is, Islamic decorative art is anything but elitist. It is a necessary and continuous conversation with the sacred via items of common use. Kitchen utensils, clothing, writing tools, household objects, a dailiness deepened and expanded through the senses. It occurs to me that the recent gifts I have received bear the language I'm learning to speak. I take the fine filaments of saffron that a writer friend has brought from Iran, mix it with rose water, add it to milk and semolina halwa, watch the color deepen and spread. On the small TV screen in my room, I drape a shawl that has Athar's verses from the Conference of the Birds. Another gift, a reminder that the journey of the spirit cannot be free of anxiety, nor is it full of validation. Rather, it is made of the most lucid, utterance of hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shadab. That was a incredibly informative and interesting presentation. I'm sure if we had like an in-person event, everyone would be clapping, so resounding, trying to look for like the clapping emoji right now, because it was very, very lovely, very, very nice to like learn about the fine arts of healing as prescribed by Islam. Thank you so much once again for taking the time to deliver this, and also for sharing your beautiful, beautiful poems. They were very thought-provoking. I saw some comments in the chat about people really enjoying the poem, calling them beautiful, calling them thought-provoking, very emotional. Yes, from Ban Mahmoud, that's what the comment I was looking for. He says, love this poem, really emotional and sad. Thank you so much, Shadab. It was really great having you once here again. And we do look forward to seeing you again next year. Please keep a time booked for us, because we will definitely want you back again.
Thank you, Mariam.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
So now moving on to our next host for the day is Yvonne Maffei. I would like to say a few words about her before calling her on board. So Yvonne Maffei has a master's and is a food and travel writer. She's an independent researcher, author, entrepreneur, and an halal economy subject matter expert. She's the founder of the first website on halal food and cooking called myhalalkitchen.com, with a mission to make global cuisine halal and to spread the concept of culinary diplomacy as a means to bring people to the table to share common values. She was born and raised in the United States of America by Sicilian and Puerto Rican parents who have informed their research interests towards studying the cuisine of Al-Andalus, which is the Muslim Sicily and the Ottoman Empire's palace foods. She has lived and traveled abroad in order to dive deeper and learn historic and modern culinary applications in such places as southern France, Italy, Spain, Morocco, the Greek islands, Turkey, Bosnia, and Croatia. Her cookbooks include My Halal Kitchen, which was published in 2016, and The Summer Ramadan Cooking, also published in 2013. She lives between San Diego, California, United States, and Vancouver, British Columbia. Very nice to have you here, Yvonne. Please, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. And Shadab, you are a very hard act to follow. It was so beautiful. I am mesmerized by everything you said, and I think I have to listen to it all over again to just grab those tidbits. I was taking notes as you were speaking, and you just have such a soothing way of teaching us about the beauty of art and so many things. I learn every time I hear you. So with that said, I will try to do my best to follow that soothing way of speaking and getting the message out about healing, although in this sense, in the culinary aspects. First
You
of all,
have an incredible feast for us as well, mashallah. I can't wait. You two ladies are absolutely amazing.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me again. I'm so excited to be here and can't wait to start to share what I'm about to talk about. It's a very exciting topic for me, and I could talk about it forever, but I have a limited time. Let me just share my screen with everybody. Here's my presentation. And okay, so I'm going to be talking about healing with Islamic medicine, remedies and recipes in the context of the Islamic kitchen. First of all, before even beginning, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I just want to say Ramadan Kareem to everybody who is attending that celebrates and as part of the Ramadan program, but also Happy Easter to all of the folks who are attending who are celebrating today. In light of the situation in Gaza, and Shadab so beautifully and eloquently addressed it, I just have to say, you know, we are talking about food, obviously, and this month in Ramadan is unusual for all of us, but particularly for a food writer who constantly shares recipes and breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Instagram to give people ideas and inspiration for cooking. This year, I decided not to do any of that and to only share presentations and talks that I was doing. And while I was doing this presentation and getting it ready, what I realized is that this situation in Gaza has really taught me a lot of lessons, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate. But in the context of what we're going to talk about and the teachings of Islam from Quran and Sunnah, I feel that this information is so needed right now because, inshallah, it will help to kind of recognize the beauty that is and the knowledge that's in our deen. And so a lot of it has been kind of lost, particularly in the way that we eat today and the processed foods that we have. And I'll get into a lot of that. But there was so many tidbits of information that I hope you'll enjoy, maybe take notes, ask questions. But there's so many things. I mean, I can't really finish it all today, obviously, in just this short time. But I think there's ways to expand on so many of the different points that I'm going to mention. So I'm going to start out talking about the foundation of Islamic healing recipes. And then I'm going to sort of work backwards in time and go over a very briefly history of Islamic cuisine. That's a huge topic in and of itself. And then the Islamic Empire food. And then I'll talk about Ibn Sina and some of the tidbits of wisdom that I think are very relevant to us today. Then I'll go towards the Sunnah healing recipes. So the reason I'm doing that is because the healing recipes from the Sunnah inform all of the, what we see in history from the Islamic Empire food. And then Shadab actually showed the same book, The Medicine of the Prophet. We were both researching from the same book. So I'm going to touch upon some important points from this book as well. So the foundation of Islamic healing recipes, the basic principle of Islamic medicine, I would say, is the preservation of health. Hifz al-siha. It's the first of the two aims of the main aims of Islamic medicine. And as Shadab also mentioned, a lot about harmony and equilibrium. This is also part of healing in medicine. Equilibrium, or the mean, itidal, stability, baqa, or just proportion, adl. Adl in Arabic is also justice. So that sense of harmony in the body is what we're aiming for in terms of our health. And the four humors, if any of you are familiar with Chinese medicine, you'll understand that heat and moisture, dampness, coolness, those are principles of traditional Chinese medicine, but this is mentioned quite a bit in books of Islamic medicine. And again, it's to balance these humors to keep the body from becoming sick or to avoid illness. And that's from this book, Medicine of the Prophet. Oops. Okay. So we can't go talking about Islamic cuisine without halal and tayyib. For those of you who are attending and don't know what halal means, it's the Arabic word for permissible. And in the sense of Islamic food, the food that is permissible by way of the Quran, that's the divine message from Allah through the Quran. But what I want to also stress is the tayyib part. And in Quran, Surah Baqarah, Allah tells us, "O you people, eat from the earth what is halal and tayyib, and follow not the footsteps of shaitan." Now, tayyib is, a lot of people sort of translate it today as organic, but Ibn Rajab translated tayyib to mean pure or atahir, and pure, organic, free of chemicals, free of anything that can harm us. That's kind of the context that I'm looking at and that I understand it. And I think that this needs to be said because when I'm going to talk about the books that I'm mentioning, they aren't addressing eating tayyib in the sense that we would today, because they didn't have the issue of pesticides and chemicals on food. But I think that's worth mentioning because that's something we need to start thinking about in terms of what keeps us healthy and what makes us sick. So the history of Islamic cuisine cannot be, I can't really expound on it in just one slide, but I'm just going to summarize it very briefly here. Because what is Islamic cuisine? Islamic cuisine is basically the cuisine of the Islamic empires. And so the books that we have are not too many, but there were cookbooks that gave us clues as to sort of the foods that you see today are watered down versions of a lot of the recipes that you would find in some of these old cookbooks. And the Abbasid caliphs, based in Baghdad, is where Muslims started to develop this rich culinary tradition. Again, this is way after the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, obviously taking everything from Quran and Sunnah, but also the foundational cooking or ingredients came from the Persians. The Persians considered to have the mother cuisine. It's sort of like if you look at French cooking, traditional French cuisine, as the mother cuisine of Europe, but all of the techniques of French cuisine are what, every chef tries to learn to become a master chef. But I think that the cuisine of the Muslim world is so underrated because we have such a complex and deeply layered form of cuisine that comes from this time period. And so the Abbasids, the North Africans, the Ottomans, the Mughals, they took the Persian cuisine and built upon it and added their own ingredients, their local ingredients, and created these amazing recipes that we don't know today, but we have watered down versions of them. And I just want to point out a really interesting book that actually explains this in deeper detail. It's called Feast, Food of the Islamic World by Anissa Halouche. She's a Lebanese food writer, and she goes into a lot of this detail. So that's a whole nother presentation in and of itself, but it's really worth studying if you want to if you want to learn, the techniques and the recipes that the palace cuisine, the palaces made, that the Muslims ate at that time, and then how things spread across the Muslim world. It's fascinating how, things went from east to west, and now, look at our food today and how it's always evolving and transforming. But the basis of it is really very, very rich. Okay, so one of my favorite books is a very small one that it's called Kitab al-Tabiq, the Book of Dishes by al-Baghdadi of the 19th century. This is such an interesting book. It's very small, and it's not one that you can actually, I think, rely on to cook with, but like today's cookbooks that I have to write, things are very, very technical. 1 teaspoon of this, half a teaspoon of that, bake at 325 degrees. Things were not written like that back then. They were estimates. They were, they were written sort of like stories, but not separated out into very succinct, lists of directions. And so, and they also told people how to prepare for cooking, which I thought was really interesting. I'm just going to read one paragraph from this book because I found it, you would never see this in a cookbook today, but it's about what how a chef should prepare himself. And it says, introduction, the title is Introduction, Which Needs to Be Known. So if you're a cook, you need to know this. Wise men have said, the cook must be knowledgeable, well-versed in the principles of the dishes, and proficient in making them. Let him take care to trim his fingernails, lest he injure them and ulcerate them, and not to let them grow long, lest dirt collect under them. Of pots, he will prefer or choose the soapstone, then the earthenware, and in case of necessity, tinned copper. The worst of food is what is cooked in a copper pot that has lost its tinning. So it's even telling you like what kind of cookware to use, which I think is really useful, to be honest. But it goes on to talk about the way to deal with spices, the type of wood to be used and how to use it. It's just very interesting. And so for anybody who's interested in history, historical cuisine, this is one of the best books, even though it's very small, but it just gives you a really good picture of the way they thought and what they cooked with, and the types of animals and things like that, which I'll get into. And the original of this book is actually in the Hagia Sophia Masjid Library in Istanbul, which I wish I would have known when I was there. But the Turks particularly loved this book and respected this book so much that they brought it to Istanbul. And that story, I don't know how they did that, but it is there. So if you're ever in Istanbul and interested, perhaps you can see it. So you can't talk about Islamic medicine without mentioning Ibn Sina, or Avicenna as he's known in Europe. Excuse me. He's known as the great sage of Islamic medicine. And he was a philosopher and a physician of the Golden Age. He came from Uzbekistan, and he wrote the standard textbook on medicine in the Arab world and Europe. You know, and before I was Muslim, which was more than 20 years ago, 25 years now.
Yvonne, can I just interrupt for 1 minute?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing the slides. Are you moving the slides or no?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I've not
You
seen
can't see
it. I can only see the first
Oh.
slide. Can anyone else tell me? Mariam, can you see
Says
the slides?
It
I'm-
says I'm paused.
If Yvonne, if you just try resharing your
Yeah,
PowerPoint, I
because
think
I
it's
only
on
see the
Windows.
I'll try
first
it again.
slide.
So,
Okay.
It's only when you mentioned Ibn Sina I realized I've not seen.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Let
So
me
make
see.
sure you go with the slide.
Sure.
No
Okay.
problem.
Sorry about that. Let's try this one more time. Okay. Can you see it now?
we can
It's the
see it.
first one only. Move to Ibn Sina.
Okay.
That's it, yeah.
There we go. Sorry, I didn't know I'd been talking and
Didn't
thought you were
realize.
seeing the slides. Sorry. Okay. And I worked so hard on them.
I know, this is it.
I'm happy to share it. Okay, so Ibn Sina. Like I was saying, even before I was Muslim, I remember reading much about Avicenna, as he's known in the West, and he has some great advice for I think for today as well as in his time. But these are some of the things I'm going to go quickly through this because there's quite a bit. But I picked the tidbits of information and his advice that I thought was really relevant to today. And I personally really resonated with this. So one of the first things he says is when healing someone, ask them first if they truly want to let go of what made them sick. That's really interesting. Excessive eating leads to illness, and all illness originates in the intestines. You have, lots of people talking today about gut health, right? I mean, I find that pretty interesting, and it seems like a novel thing to people today, but this is very ancient wisdom. And this is drawing from Islamic text as well as Greek philosophy and Greek medicine as well. Tell me what you eat and I will tell you what illness you have. I found that one to be very fascinating. Medicine teaches us not how to live long, but how to live rightly. I think we've lost that one today. Traditional or current medicine is very different. Anything excessive is contrary to nature. And I can't help but think about a lot of what Shadab was talking about this balance and this harmony. And, when the body is off balance, we're not good. Health means balance and harmony. So it's just fascinating. Human health is more sublime than the sum of all the sciences invented by scientists. I guess that's the modern day version of health is wealth. This one I really resonated with. A house without sunlight welcomes a doctor. I really resonate this with because I moved from San Diego to Vancouver, Canada. And when I'm in Vancouver, I don't get a lot of sunlight as much as I did in San Diego. And I feel not as healthy, mentally and physically. So when I read this, I just had to include it. And I thought, everyone says you just got to get out for 10 or 15 minutes and feel the light, and it makes a huge difference. So this was known, centuries ago. The truth is that it is not the age of the patient, but the age of the disease that matters. So that, you know, getting your, you know, your issues in check early, important, things like that. If you walk after eating, that it indicates that you are healthy, both mentally and physically. That's a great one. I know in our, I'm half Italian, and the passeggiata, or eating or walking after you eat, is like a rule of thumb, and they're some of the healthiest people in the world. So I think that they must have been listening to Avicenna. I love this last one. Joy facilitates digestion. So when you're happy, your food goes down better, I guess. Do not use medicine unless absolutely necessary. I like that one. That's my way of living. Disease always comes from excess or deficiency, that is, from imbalance. So again, back to the harmony part. The doctor treats the disease, but nature heals. And how many times have we heard, you know, get out in nature, get out. Forest bathing is popular, go to the ocean. I never felt better than when I've sat in front of the ocean and just listened to the waves. It's literally, you know, resetting your nervous system. And then this one I love, kindness is healing. You know, how many of us have just need kindness, and the world needs that, right? From, you know, healing from physical illness, a mental illness, anything, you know, when someone is kind to you, just feel better. There are two things that harm the heart, grief and anxiety. And this one I actually have a recipe for that comes from the Sunnah. So I'm going to talk about that a bit later. But this is a really very profound one to me. Two things that harm the heart, grief and anxiety, and how much anxiety people are experiencing today from all the things that we, you know, see and hear in the world. The cleanliness of the heart and the health of the body are the strongest forms of resistance. And I love this one. This is the last one of Ibn Sina because of the word resistance. And this one I have to contemplate on a little bit. And I think it's beautiful and profound. The cleanliness of the heart and the health of the body are the strongest forms of resistance. Without a clean heart and a strong body, how good are we really, right? How much can we protect ourselves and the things that we love? Interesting. So now I'm going to talk about Ottoman cuisine just for a bit, because this is the one I have the most experience with, because I lived in Turkey for some time. This is the Topkapı Palace kitchens of the Sultan. I've not actually visited this. I never got to this particular place, but living in Turkey, I experienced a lot of the Ottoman cuisine. And even before living in Turkey, the Turkish people that I met, actually one of my very best friends, she used to always, when she would serve me something, whether she would come to my door with a dish or when she'd have me at her house, she always explained where it came from in Ottoman cuisine and what ailment it would heal in your body. I thought that was fascinating, but this is part of the psyche, the mindset, because it's part of tradition. So the unique features of Ottoman cuisine are a very close relationship between medicine and tradition. Again, they were building upon centuries of other historical cuisines that were coming towards them. When Constantinople became Istanbul, all the people that came to the Sultan's palace and the different ethnic groups that came and arrived, the chefs in the Sultan's kitchen were experimenting with all of it. But at the heart of it was that the food should inform health. And so, so one of the things that you would see, you know, even if you go to Turkey today, there's lots of people who still, you know, it's watered down now, but they have this in their tradition that the food and the drink will all come from some medicinal type of knowledge. And because it was the Ottoman medicine was influenced by Ibn Sina and Galen, who succeeded, who came before Ibn Sina. So all of this is these are building blocks of medicine that informed cuisine. which I absolutely love, because your food should be healthy. It shouldn't just be, it should be to nourish us and not just feed our bodies and do nothing more, right? So before the intro of modern medicine, the balanced state of the four humors, blood, spleen, phlegm, and bile, were regarded as an indicator of good health. When this balance was upset, a diet was recommended that contained certain foods and beverages to restore the balance of these humors in the body. So this was the MO of the palace kitchens. And I learned this from Turkish friends. They would say to me, don't you know, like back in the day, you know, when people knew about these things, the people who worked in the palace, who you know, who studied at the palace, if someone was sick, they would get a particular type of food that would sort of regulate their bodies again. So this was sort of a well-known thing, but people don't talk about it much unless you ask. And what's interesting is that people think that olive oil and tomato paste, and that something that's like very common in Turkish cuisine today, that it was, you know, like an original part of Turkish cuisine, but it wasn't. It was actually mostly things like butter and animal fat, because most of the Turks that came into Istanbul were from the Caucasus. It was later that the Greek cuisine kind of melded into that, and then olive oil and tomato paste became part of the cuisine, which I'm so happy about, because some of my favorite Turkish dishes have that in the recipes. What I found very interesting was that Istanbulites chose not to eat beef. You know, that's not the case today as much, but I found I had to mention this because they considered it not a healthy food, and I thought this was pretty interesting. And this again comes, why didn't they consider it a healthy food? And this was based in their medical knowledge, that it just wasn't as beneficial to the human body as lamb meat. So lamb meat was much more popular, and that also goes back to the sunnah foods, which I'll mention in a minute. So now, working backwards, we're going to the healing foods from the sunnah. So sunnah means what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to eat. So again, all of these empire foods were informed by the sunnah foods first, right? Everything had to be halal and tayyib, and then, you know, they could experiment with whatever else that they wanted. But going back, now that food was very rich. Now we're going back in time a little bit, and we're going much simpler. And this, because the sunnah foods were very, very simple. And this is where I find the most interesting, because when we look at the way food is today, it's complex, complicated, painted, overly processed, totally unhealthy. You know, things have so many ingredients in them. And what I used to always tell people was, when I was doing cooking classes and I was starting my halal kitchen in the very beginning, I used to say, you know, when people are reading labels for everything, and you have to read what is one ingredient, there's one ingredient, but that has 3 ingredients in it. And it's so complicated. And I would tell people, you know, buy something that has like 1 or 2 ingredients. If not, make it yourself if you can. The simpler, the better. And actually, that is the sunnah way of eating, is that you kind of edit things down to the basics. So what are some of the sunnah foods? Honey, dates, olive oil, vinegar, melons, pomegranates, figs, black seed, and mostly lamb. That's not all they ate, or all Prophet Muhammad, that's not all he ate, but these are like the most common and favored foods. And this doesn't mean that, you know, if you don't live in an area that has, you know, fresh olive oil, like local olive oil or pomegranates, you know, doesn't mean you have to eat those things if they're not local to you. It's just, these are just, you know, suggestions on things that he ate and what are the benefits of them. So we all know about the black seed. Well, Muslims know. This is a very common in the Muslim community, why we feel so close to the black seed, and why, you know, it's sunnah to eat it, and to there's actually a particular way to eat it. But the Prophet said, indeed, this black seed is a cure for every illness except for asam. What is asam? Aisha said, death. Prophet replied. So this is questionable for some scholars say that it's not exactly death, that, you know, this is maybe not exactly the case, but it cures a lot of things. And you can do your research. If you type in black seed into Google, you'll find 1,000,001 research papers about it now and how beneficial it is in so many ways, whether it's the oil or the seeds and ground up maybe with honey. There's different ways to apply it, but this is one of the sunnah foods. And honey. This is also a sunnah food, but in honey there are so many benefits to the stomach, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to drink honey with cold water. He loved cold, sweet drinks, and he loved yogurt drinks. So again, this is just, it doesn't mention what kind of honey, but from a food perspective, I always tell people, make sure the honey is unadulterated, raw, unpasteurized if you can, because in the purest form, in the most tayyib form, that's when you're going to get the most benefit. Another food that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, loved was meat, but the lamb shoulder meat was his favorite. And he loved it, but he didn't eat a lot of it. And the reason I wanted to mention this is because I think we are a meat-loving community. We love our meat. We want to shower our guests with meat when they come. Some people eat it almost every day, but this was not the way of Prophet Muhammad. He abstained from it for extended periods of time, in fact. And so the early Muslims were very close to being vegetarian. They weren't vegetarian, but it just meant that they didn't eat meat often. And so even studies today say, you know, too much meat isn't really good for us, and for so many reasons. So I have actually taken a deeper look at this because I like meat and I like it a lot. And but do I need to have it all the time? Once in 40 days, perhaps, is a good rule of thumb, and that's what's also mentioned in the Medicine of the Prophet book. So I want to bring it back to this book because there's so much in here. My mind is full of so many things I want to say, but it's got information that, you know, it's not just for eating, but also for living. And so you can take a deep dive in that and kind of make your own conclusions about how you want to go forward and how you'd want to feed your family. I wish I had read this, you know, 20 years ago in deep detail, because I think it would have given me a better idea of, you know, the actual diet I should have had a long time ago. Okay, so one of the healing recipes that involves meat or lamb is a recipe called tharid. It was the traditional dish of the Arabs in the early years of Islam, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, declared it the best of all dishes. It's the most ancient and sacred of Arab Muslims, passed down as a sunnah. And basically it is, you can use lamb or beef cut into cubes. I have a picture of it. I'll show you in just a second, and I'll have the recipe on my website. But it's cooked, it's like a stew. It's like a meat stew, a lamb stew, a beef stew cooked with vegetables. And then it's flipped onto a plate of flatbread or pieces of bread. And so it's got the meat and the broth, and, you know, it's plopped down on this meat and this bread, and then it's eaten together. And there's dozens of versions of it. Actually, in the book I have, and I show it in a later slide, Medieval Cuisines of the Islamic World. This is another wonderful, wonderful book. I actually think there are recipes in here that people could follow because of the way they're written. But it mentions that there are dozens of versions of tharid, and there was a tharid of Nowruz for Persians and a tharid of the Sabbath for Jews. So I found that to be very interesting. So this is what it looks like. This is kind of one that I made not too long ago. But again, it's like, to me, it looks like a beef stew or a lamb stew, and it's delicious. And it's actually better the next day because it has time to soak in the bread. But so it's just oh, and Ibn Khayyam writes in his book that tharid is composed of some bread, which is the best of food. Bread is the best of food, and meat, which is the best of flavoring. When these two are combined together, no other food can surpass them. So it's interesting that, you know, bread is so demonized today because of, again, going back to the things that are put into bread today, the pesticides, the chemicals. And so they're not, you know, their frame of reference was that these ingredients were tayyib or pure. So I find that to be something we need to go back to, you know, and also in moderation. Another favorite food of Prophet Muhammad were melons. And I found this to be interesting. Aisha radiallahu anha said Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, used to eat melon with fresh dates, and then said, we remove the heat of this one, the dates, with the coldness of this one, the watermelon, and the coldness of this one, the watermelon, with the heat of this one. So they basically cancel each other out. So again, going back to the four humors of, you know, the temperature of food. So how did he know that at that time, right? We can't mention Sunnah food without dates. There's so much, so many benefits to dates. I have met people who say they don't like dates, and I say, you know, please just give them a try. So I could try to come up with as many recipes with dates as possible, just to give people a way of trying them, like an entry recipe. And that's what I did in the early years of writing my Halal Kitchen, because I thought, well, these are such delicious and caramely, beautiful fruits. And I grew up eating them, coming from an Italian family, because they grow in Sicily. And so probably from the Arabs who planted the trees in Muslim Sicily. And they weren't strange to me, but for some people, they had never tried them. And so there's so many benefits here, but I want to point out the ajwa date, because the ajwa date is, there are many varieties of dates, but the ajwa date is a particular black date. You don't find them usually in big box stores. You find them in Middle Eastern markets, Mediterranean markets, and they almost look like olives when you're passing by. But ajwa date is very, very important, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, he who eats 7 ajwa dates every morning will not be affected by poison or magic on the day he eats them. So this is a strong belief of Muslims because of this hadith. And another very interesting point that I came across in studying the hadith was that Prophet Muhammad said, a house in which there are no dates, its people will go hungry. So in other words, a house without dates has no food. And that's hard for us to believe today, right? Because we have 1,000,001 ingredients in our pantries. But that's worth it to kind of look into in terms of the health benefits. And when if I can go back to the meat for a second, when I mentioned that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did not eat, sometimes he would go long periods of time without eating meat. In the absence of meat, he would eat dates. So there has to be something very beneficial if he could sustain himself with dates instead of meat. Now there is a recipe, it's a prophetic recipe called nabid, and this was a favorite recipe of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And in it, what he would do is he would have dates, like usually an odd number, soaked in water overnight, and then drink the liquid, eat the dates the next day, and then do the same thing, soak them, cover the container, and have the same thing again at night. I did this recently because it was the first time I'd ever actually tried it, even though I've known this recipe for a long time. And it's extremely soothing for the stomach and like a very good digestive. But you can't do this for very long. So the warning of it was that you can't do this for more than 3 days because it will start to ferment. And when it ferments, it becomes alcohol, and alcohol is forbidden. And so this is something you might want to try, especially in Ramadan, since we have a plethora of dates. But I recommend don't do it with medjool dates because they just didn't really hold very well. I would do it with another date, perhaps ajwa dates are better. You can't talk about sunnah foods without olive oil, the blessed, blessed, blessed olive tree. Those of you who are watching about Palestine right now, every time I scroll through, there's an Instagram account I see called Palestine Grandma, and there's always a grandma doing something with olive trees and olives, and it's beautiful. It's not the only account that does that, but Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, use olive oil for eating and for rubbing on the body, for it is a blessed tree. So face care, skin care, and eating. I mean, olive oil and butter are the only two oils I use in my cooking, but I gravitate towards olive oil the most because it's also, again, something I grew up as being Italian. So it's something that's normal to me, but also olive oil soap. If you go to Middle Eastern Mediterranean markets, you can find olive oil soap from Nablus, from Aleppo, from there's another one. Yeah, Aleppo and Nablus are two of the popular ones. But put that on your skin, your face, your hair. I put it on my hair. It's amazing. This olive tree is actually from a farm in Turkey where I visited last summer because I've started to have an olive oil from Turkey being bottled. And the farm, to visit an olive tree farm it's a very solemn and grounding and humbling experience. These, they don't need much. They don't have any natural predators, very similar to date farms, if you guys have ever been to a date farm. And they're so incredible. I visited Jordan last summer and I saw an olive tree that was over 1,000 years old. So there's something magical about them. But again, this goes back to our prophetic tradition. Another healing ingredient is vinegar. And this is sometimes questionable. I get questions all the time about, is balsamic vinegar halal and things like this. I'm not going to get into that now. But Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, what a good condiment is vinegar. And personal experience, and also I think in Italian cuisine, we tend to almost drink it after a meal, or you have it in a salad at the end because it helps the body to just digest food. And so I have a tummy ache, I have a little bit of vinegar and things tend to go down very nicely. This one surprised me a little bit, but the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was known to bring cheese from Talbuk and he ate it. So I guess this is kind of one of those things where you think, well, it's not like a fruit or vegetable. Is it something that he ate? And I was surprised to see it in the hadith, actually, but not surprised. But in a way, it's nice. Talbina. This is the last recipe that I'm going to talk about because it is, remember what I mentioned earlier, Ibn Sina talking about grief and anxiety. This is the recipe that literally takes it away, supposedly. So in Bukhari, it's noted that talbina soothes the heart of the patient and relieves him of some of his sadness. Now, what is talbina? Talbina is kind of, it's like a porridge. To me, it's very similar to kheer. For those of you who know kheer, it's well, I've always had it in Pakistani households, but it's sort of a milky vermicelli cereal with cardamom and other spices. But this talbina is made with barley flour or barley. You take pearl barley and you grind it. And I'm going to show you in just a second, but it also has very similar spices like cardamom and you could put saffron in it and so on. Another quote about it is in Bukhari, the talbina gives rest to the heart of the patient and makes it active and relieves some of his sorrow and grief. So barley is known to lower cholesterol, blood sugar, and blood pressure and relieve depression. I tried it a few days back and I'll show you. This is what it looked like. these are some of the ingredients in it. So in the back here is the Chinese script, because I bought it at an Asian market. It was an organic barley. Then I have some raw honey from a local honeybee keeper. He's a Muslim who has honeybees, and we got that honey from him. Some dates in the back, and then some nuts, walnuts, pistachio, and almonds. So the original recipe calls for grinding the barley, and you have to grind the barley to get the maximum benefit out of it. And I did it without grinding the barley, and it's not the same, and it's too thick. So you have to use like a spice grinder or coffee grinder, grind up the barley before cooking it. So it's cooked in milk, and I added, I found various recipes online, but the one I liked the most had bay leaf in it. It had cinnamon, and then it had chopped dates, and then some nuts in the mixture, and some on top. And it takes like 45 minutes to cook, so it's pretty long. So if you're going to make it for suhoor, you have to get up kind of early. But it's a good sort of breakfast food, I think. And this is sort of me cooking it. But this is when I use the whole barley, and it's not as nice. But I'm just showing you, I used Ceylon cinnamon. It's like the best, most aromatic cinnamon, which is actually mentioned in the Baghdad cookery. That's the kind of cinnamon you should be using. There's cardamom in it, and a bay leaf. It's very aromatic. And then you can get, the recipe will be on my website. But if you look here, you might not be able to see it, but I used a different type of honey in this one. It's more of a runny honey, but I think the raw honey was better. Anyway, that's, so even just looking at it, even cooking it and smelling it kind of warmed my heart and warmed my stomach. It was really, really delicious. Oops. Trying to, okay, let me stop that so I can, okay. So let me go. So now I just want to go into book recommendations, because this is the topic we can talk about for ages, but we only have so much time. And there's so many great books that I want to suggest to you to go deeper, and to also kind of encourage you to simplify your diet, to simplify your foods, to take a good hard look at your refrigerator, at your pantry. And in light of the situation we see our brothers and sisters going through, starving, famine, eating grass, eating whatever they can find, it really made me think, what do we really need? How much do we really need? We need moderation, we need balance, but more importantly, we need nourishing food, tayyib food, things that are pure and whole, and quality, not quantity. And that's exactly what this book teaches, The Medicine of the Prophet, preserving your health and restoring health when it's out of balance. And it has that mix of religious and medical information that is based on Quran and Sunnah. But again, there are facets of, knowledge that came before. So it's very beautiful in that sense. So other book resources that I mentioned, the Baghdad Cookery book for, culinary historian aficionados. It's a great medieval cuisine of the Islamic world. I recommend this book for anyone who is just interested in kind of experimenting with recipes that were made in medieval Islamic times, like Al-Andalus, Persia. It's just fascinating, and you can actually make some of these recipes, I think, a little easier. And there's lots of tidbits of information. This is a Turkish book I'm going to recommend for anybody who travels to Istanbul. I know it's not technically history, but it's called Ramazan Lezzetleri, which means delicious Ramadan. And I know it's in Turkish, but if you want an authentic book that has recipes that are like Ramadan pide, which is Ramadan breads, or there's a Iskandar, there's recipes made with sour cherries, which were very popular during the Ottoman times. Get the book for at least the pictures and try to find the recipes in English, because there's just some things you won't find in other Turkish books. But also, I want to mention, if anybody is going to Istanbul, there are some places, actually some of them closed during COVID, but there are some restaurants that serve Ottoman palace cuisine, and they have seasonal menus. I've been to one called Matba. It's near the Hagia Sophia, and it's fantastic. It has the menus change during the seasons, but they will give you a spread of food that comes from the Sultan's palace kitchens. I hope it's still open, but the food is very interesting and very beautiful. So it's just a different experience. And then for two books that are more modern, about modern times, The Quranic Prescription, Unlocking the Secrets to Optimal Health. This is by Dr. Madia Saeed. She's a Chicago-based doctor and friend of mine who wrote this book. It doesn't have a ton of historic information, but it's basically more about the things that we're suffering with in our time. And she talks a lot about getting back on track, using Quranic principles, and the importance of things like gratitude. And, so there is that spirituality aspect as well. And I think she really hits it home on family life as well, like, how to really get the whole family healthy. And then there's one last book I would recommend. It's called Then and Now, Food in the Time of the Prophet by Sakina. But her book on Amazon it's Then and Now, but her name on that book is Kate Hepburn, but this must be her Muslim name. But this is maybe an older version, but that's a great book. It's also about, what's happening in our food today, and how we need to get back to the way, of the Prophet. And so I think those are very valid points, because so many people I know are suffering from health issues, and I see a lot of the solutions in these books and in this knowledge that we have, this wisdom that is untapped, that the whole world can benefit from, not just Muslims. This is not for Muslims, by Muslims. This is information that if you have an open mind to, something that could work, it just makes sense, because it's it's a holistic approach to becoming healthy. And what you put into your body, it's the saying is like, you are what you eats, right? So whatever the animals are eating, we're eating too. We need to become more conscious consumers and conscious eaters, and more mindful of everything that we have in our kitchens and our homes and put in our bodies. And I think these books kind of highlight that importance. I mean, the Baghdad book the cookery book that mentioned how the chef should prepare himself, and cleanliness, the hygiene was so important. These are things that I think are sort of lost on us because we're just so busy and we don't have time for it. But time stops when our health is at stake. And so again, let's go back to that. The whole concept of Islamic medicine was prevention of illness in the first place. But when you're out of balance, let's get you back. And so I find that to be something that I want to explore way more of now that I've taken a deeper dive, and I hope that I've done some service to the information. But if you have questions, you can always ask me, and I have a lot of research references that I'll just leave it right here. If anybody wants the PowerPoint, I'm happy to share it, and you can reach me in any way you like.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. We'll definitely be reaching out to you through your YouTube channel. This has again been another superb presentation. It was an absolute delight to learn about the delicious recipes, the healing ingredients, and their links with the Sunnah of our blessed Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and most importantly, the powerful quotes from Ibn Sina. I've been taking a lot of screenshots about those quotes. Like, I really need to save them. Thank you so much, Yvonne, for sharing. And the audience as well, they describe the presentation as fascinating, wonderful, phenomenal, and interesting. We really do wish you the very best in your mission to make the global cuisine halal. And a big thank you to both of our speakers, Yvonne and Shadab. You are so talented, and thank you so much for giving us this fascinating presentation so early in the morning in California, right after your suhoor. We are very grateful for you, and we really look forward to hosting you again sometime soon. Thank you so much for coming on board to us today. And finally, to our audience, our next event is going to be next week at 2 p.m. on the 6th of April, on a Saturday, and it's going to be about the first Moroccans in Manchester. So we are taking you all the way to North Africa to learn about the Moroccans that migrated to Manchester in the 19th and early 20th century. So please join us with Dr. Khalid as we'll be talking about what it was like for them to settle into Manchester as Moroccan merchants. So make sure you book your tickets right now so you can join us next week, Saturday. And a big thank you to the MACFEST team, Tom and Nishwan, for hosting us today. Tom technically hosting us as well. We are very grateful for you. And our audience for always joining us from all over the world, from Indonesia, South Wales, United States, and all over the UK. We are very grateful for your support, and we do hope to see you again. So Assalamu alaikum and have a good weekend, everyone. See you next week, Saturday, inshallah.
Thank you, Mariam, for your excellent hosting, mashallah.
Thank you.
Assalamu
Thank you.
alaikum.
Thank
Ramadan
you.
Kareem,
Bye.
everyone. Thank
See
you,
you all.
ladies.